Well, welcome to our weekly devotionals. Hopefully, they've been encouraging to you. And we're going to be switching, moving from the topic of the discipline of prayer to the discipline of fasting. And fasting is typically, when we think of it, we generally think of an abstinence of food, or whether it be a full day or a partial day going without food. Within the last several years, I would say, there's been what I've seen people do is have a social media fast or some type of usually has to do with technology, and that's something that I've seen people do. But generally, the normal idea of fasting is a abstinence of food, and the text that we're going to be looking at today is found in Matthew 6, 16 through 18. And this is from the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus says this: "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. When you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you." And so Jesus is talking here. The whole sermon, he really gets and drives the point that there's a way to live righteously and a way to live unrighteously. And his examples, for the most part, of how to live unrighteously usually ends up being the Pharisees. And so one of the things that one of the ways that the Pharisees abused fasting was through uh, using it as a means to check off uh, their spiritual maturity box, to make themselves look better, and to make themselves look more spiritual than everybody else. That, oh, woe is them, they're fasting for a week, or they're fasting for 3 days, whatever it is. Uh, and even Jesus here even says, he's like, they looked gloomy. Do not look gloomy like the hypocrites. And even more so, they would disfigure their faces just to be seen by others, to show that, look at us, we're physically depriving ourselves of food to look like we are above everybody else. And he said, and it's interesting, Jesus says they have received their reward. Um, in one sense, they do. In one sense, they do receive their reward. They get acknowledged by men. They get acknowledged by people that they are spiritually mature. But we know from other texts and from other parts of Scripture that when it's reference to how God views us, he's not looking at the externals, he's looking at our heart. And Jesus then says from verse 17 to 18, "But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." And again, just on a side note, it is interesting to point out that after the Lord's Prayer, which happens earlier in this text, he does switch now to saying Father as opposed to God. Again, pointing that shift in his thinking, that those who follow God can call him Father. But he does say that when you fast, don't do it to be seen by others. Do it to be seen by God. And that's one of the things about fasting. Jesus is telling them to do it as a private act, as a simple devotion to God, and not to be seen by others. And so as we study this the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at a couple different texts, some from the Old, some from the New, and just to see how can we apply this, because it's a discipline that is not readily practiced. It took a legalistic form of itself if you study church history, but it is a discipline once in a while worth trying. Some good books on the on the act of fasting. One would be A Hunger for God by John Piper. Um, Another book is called God's Chosen Fast. Um, I think the last name of the author, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it was Wallace. And then I think there's another one called Fasting, a Neglected Discipline. Those are just some that I've read. They're very short, probably the exception of short being this. But they're very short short books that you can read about fasting and just kind of seeing the scriptural basis for it. But as we study it, you know, again, it's not a required discipline, but something that we, once in a while, we should think about putting into practice, because it is depriving. The basis of it, of depriving ourselves of food, is to show uh, just spiritually how starved we are, and to show how spiritually we need God. So, as we study that, hopefully that's on your guys' mind. That's my prayer, that it's on your mind. And we'll see you next week.